The chamber was silent, the kind of silence that hums with anticipation before history tilts on its axis. Cameras clicked. Papers shuffled. Then, in that stillness, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice low but electric. "The math ain't mathing, y'all." The words sliced through the air, sharper than a gavel strike. For a heartbeat, no one moved. You could almost see the question hanging there, alive and dangerous, daring anyone to challenge it. Then came the flicker of disbelief, brows lifting, aides whispering, a murmur building through the room like a storm rolling in. On screen, her words echo as flashes of the past strobe across the frame. Melania Trump on the cover of British GQ, her name glowing in silver type. Another image. Sports Illustrated, the year 2000. Headlines whispering, the Einstein visa. The contrast is jarring. Cameras spotlight against Crockett's raw honesty under the fluorescent lights of the Capitol. In a system built on rules, someone finally questioned the arithmetic of privilege. The camera returns to Crockett. She's composed, unflinching. Around her, the polished faces of lawmakers struggle to mask discomfort. This wasn't supposed to happen today, not here, not this bluntly. But truth has a rhythm of its own, and she's keeping perfect time. The voiceover continues, steadier now, with the cadence of revelation. They called it the Einstein visa. A golden ticket reserved for the exceptional, the brilliant, the world-renowned, the few who shape history. But somewhere between the laws and the loopholes, something didn't add up. Cut again to the magazines. Flash. Melania smiles for the lens, the image of perfection, the embodiment of opportunity. Then back to the hearing room. Jasmine's steady gaze holds the weight of every immigrant who's ever been told to prove their worth. "Since we're talking about integrity," she begins again, and the murmurs fade. She's not just questioning a visa. She's questioning a system. The music swells, minor keys bending toward unease. The voiceover fades in one last time, softer now, almost prophetic. One sentence. 7 words. A question too precise to ignore. A beat of silence. But the story behind that one sentence goes deeper. Back to how a supermodel from Slovenia ended up with a visa reserved for geniuses. They call it the EB1. The Einstein visa. A door that only opens for the few who leave the rest of us staring in awe. The words fall against a backdrop of glowing documents. Official seals, embossed stamps. The phrase, extraordinary ability, underlined like a secret. The narrator's tone sharpens. To qualify, you must not just be good. You must be rare, exceptional, the kind of person who redefines the limits of human achievement. Images fade in and out, a scientist in a lab coat adjusting a microscope, an Olympic sprinter breaking the tape, a novelist holding a Pulitzer medal. Then, a pause. A slow zoom into a single name typed on an old immigration petition. Melania Trump. Olympic medalists, Nobel laureates, renowned researchers, the voice repeats. And a fashion model. The question hangs like smoke. The screen cuts to black for a beat before a low thrum builds underneath. On screen text flashes, EB1. Reserved for aliens of extraordinary ability. For most immigrants, the road to America is long and brutal. Endless forms, waiting lists, denials that crush dreams before they begin. Families separated, talents wasted, hope postponed. A montage rolls, people standing in visa lines, fingers inked for background checks, a mother clutching rejection papers as a child tugs her sleeve. Then, crossfade to Melania stepping out of a limousine in New York, cameras flashing. But for some, the narrator continues, the path seems smoother, greased by fame, fortune, and powerful connections. For them, the rules bend, the gatekeepers smile, the math starts to twist. Cut to a close-up of the USCIS criteria. The camera glides over each requirement as the narrator reads. A record of international acclaim. Proof of sustained success. Evidence of being among the small percentage who have risen to the very top of their field. Each line pulses in sync with the beat. Then, Crockett's voice echoes faintly in the background. The math ain't mathing, y'all. The narrator lowers his tone, almost confiding, and yet, in 2001, that very visa, designed for the Einsteins, the Olympians, the visionaries, was granted to a rising model from Slovenia. No Nobel, no Olympic record, no groundbreaking research, just a beautiful face on glossy covers. Shots of magazine spreads flicker across the screen, each one glamorous yet eerily hollow. British GQ, Sports Illustrated, Vanity Fair. The captions fade into the same word. This isn't envy, the voice reminds us. It's arithmetic. A question of who gets rewarded, and who gets overlooked. Then the scene widens. A split screen shows two Americas, one where a model ascends to citizenship through privilege, and another where a doctoral researcher from abroad watches their visa expire despite world-class work. To most immigrants, the EB1 is a legend, a prize whispered about in online forums, chased for years, and lost in a single technicality. But when power steps in, the line between extraordinary and connected begins to blur. The music swells, strings tightening, percussion like a ticking clock. And that, the narrator concludes, is what Jasmine Crockett understood in that hearing room, Her question wasn't gossip, it was geometry, measuring the shape of fairness itself. A moment of silence. The sound of a pen clicking. So if the visa is meant for the world's brightest minds, the narrator leans into the final word, letting it hover. How did Melania Trump qualify? That's where things get complicated. Every story of power begins with access. And in Melania Trum's case, access came wrapped in velvet, photographed in flashbulbs, and delivered through a network that knew how to make doors open quietly. The camera pans across New York in the late 1990s, limousines gliding past Fifth Avenue, fashion photographers shouting directions, the skyline glittering with opportunity for those who already knew where to stand. Over this, the narrator continues. She arrived in America chasing a dream, but unlike millions who arrive with nothing but determination, Melania's ascent would be cushioned by connections most can't even imagine. A whisper of camera shutters. A modeling portfolio drops onto a desk. Her name, Melania Trump, typed neatly across the cover. The voiceover folds in like a confession. She wasn't yet Mrs. Trump. Not yet the First Lady. Just another hopeful model in a city built on beauty and money. But beauty can open the kind of doors talent alone cannot. A soft shift in tone, almost surgical. The EB-1 visa requires proof of extraordinary ability. But extraordinary is a word that bends easily in the hands of influence. Cue an immigration lawyer's voice, calm and professional. It's subjective, he says. If a model gets global press, she could qualify. The narrator picks up the thread, and global press she had. Photo shoots in Paris. Appearances in Milan. Magazine covers that gave her what the system demands. Evidence of visibility. It didn't matter that visibility and genius are not the same thing. On paper, the math looked just convincing enough. The scene widens, contrasting frames. On one side, Melania on the catwalk, lights flaring, applause echoing. On the other, a man in a cramped apartment poring over visa documents, rejection stamps bleeding red across the page. Voiceover lower now, carrying a weight of indictment. For some, the system is a wall. For others, it's a runway. The difference isn't merit, it's proximity to power. Donald Trump's silhouette enters the montage, tower logos, newspaper headlines, red carpets. By the time Melania met Donald Trump, her modeling days had already linked her to the elite circles, where success isn't earned, it's arranged. The narrator continues. And when your partner is one of the most connected men in New York, the word impossible starts to lose its meaning. A pause. The music shifts to a deeper pulse. But this isn't about one woman's ambition. It's about a system calibrated to reward those who already fit the mold. America loves stories of self-made success, but behind the gloss, there's always a ledger, a list of who paid, who pulled strings, and who got left behind. Another lawyer's quote fades in. Recipients are supposed to be the best of the best, he says. But in the end, an adjudication officer makes a judgment call. A judgment call. Two words that tilt the story. The narrator repeats them slowly, almost like a warning. A judgment call. That's all it takes to turn privilege into legality. Archival shots show immigration queues stretching around embassy walls, interviews filled with nervous laughter, the sound of stamps slamming, Demonida. Then, cut back to Melania stepping onto a red carpet, the flash of bulbs exploding like fireworks. For the millions who never make it past the paperwork, the EB-1 is a myth. For Melania it became a mirror, reflecting not genius but access. The narrator's tone tightens. We're told that America is a meritocracy, a land where hard work and brilliance rise to the top. But what happens when beauty, wealth, and association become the new definitions of extraordinary ability? What happens when the system designed to find the best minds is used to elevate the best connected? Cut to a stack of visa applications. Hundreds of them. Blurring into one another. Over them, Crockett's earlier line echoes faintly. The math ain't mathin', y'all. Then a quiet, almost mournful shift. Maybe Melania didn't ask for special treatment. Maybe she simply walked through a door that others opened for her. But the question remains, why was that door ever unlocked? The scene dims to grayscale. The narrator whispers. Privilege doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just smiles for the camera. A lingering silence, then the final line lands with precision. But every structure of privilege eventually meets its challenger. And her name was Jasmine Crockett. Before the headlines, before the viral clips and the thunderclap quotes, there was simply Jasmine, from Texas. A daughter of the South who carried her grandmother's grit and her community's hope in equal measure. The screen fills with heat shimmer over cracked Dallas pavement, the sound of cicadas, a woman's laughter drifting over porch steps. She wasn't born into power, she was born into purpose. The voice softens, almost reverent. In a state where speaking truth can still come at a cost, Jasmine learned early that silence protects no one. Her mother taught her that integrity isn't something you wear, it's something you live. Cut to a young Jasmine in a courtroom gallery, watching attorneys spar. A flicker of ambition passes across her face. She didn't dream of fame. She dreamed of fairness, of using the law not as a weapon but as a shield. The narration continues, rising with her story. From her first days as a public defender, she took the cases no one else wanted. The wrongfully accused, the overlooked, the ones who couldn't afford the system meant to protect them. And in every courtroom, she learned the same lesson, that justice doesn't speak unless someone makes it. Images flash. Her first campaign posters stapled to light poles, volunteers handing out flyers, Jasmine shaking hands at church picnics, her voice steady over the hum of folding chairs and fans. When she ran for office, they said she was too bold, too young, too loud. But she knew that in politics, truth-telling sounds loud only to those who've grown comfortable with lies. Music swells, low brass and drums like a heartbeat. She won anyway. The screen cuts to Washington. Marble halls, fluorescent lights. The buzz of microphones being adjusted before a hearing. In the Capitol, where tradition wears a suit and condescension wears a smile, she arrived with nothing but conviction and a southern cadence that cut sharper than most realized. Footage rolls from an earlier clash. Marjorie Taylor Greene sneering, Crockett's brow lifting just slightly before she fires back with wit wrapped in calm precision. She didn't shout, she didn't fold. She simply told the truth, and the truth did what it always does. It rearranged the room. In a Congress obsessed with spectacle, she became the rare kind of leader who didn't need to perform. She came to bear witness, to remind the powerful that arrogance is not authority. The music softens. A still image, Jasmine walking through the Capitol corridors, a file folder pressed to her chest. The voice becomes personal, almost intimate. Representation isn't a slogan to her, it's survival. Every time she takes that microphone, she carries a generation that's been told to wait its turn. And she's decided that turn is now. Cut to her speaking on the House floor. I didn't come here to play games. I came here to do right by the people who sent me. The narrator continues, she's the kind of lawmaker who studies the fine print, not the headlines. Who reads the footnotes before she raises her hand. Because she knows that corruption hides in details, and hypocrisy wears fine jewelry. The tempo rises as clips of her questioning witnesses flash across the screen, each one a small act of resistance. In a room full of noise, Crockett's power came not from volume, but from clarity. Images fade into the faces of her supporters. Black women in church hats, young organizers holding homemade signs, families watching from living rooms. To them, she's more than a representative. She's proof. Proof that truth, when spoken with courage, still moves mountains. Her rise wasn't an accident. It was a reaction, a response to decades of dismissal, erasure, and doubt. And that's what makes her dangerous to the status quo. Because she doesn't just question the system. She exposes it. A pause, then the narrator leans in, the tone sharper. They called her confrontational. They called her emotional. But those words are just code for uncompromising. She's not here to make comfort. She's here to make change. The montage builds. Crockett standing in rallies, comforting a crying constituent, laughing with colleagues, then walking alone through the Capitol steps at dusk. Every fight she's taken on has been a test of resolve, and every test has made her stronger. Her calm isn't weakness. It's strategy. Cut to a close-up of her hands flipping through immigration records, a pen tapping thoughtfully. The voiceover lowers, deliberate. Because beneath the calm, she's cataloging every inconsistency, every half-truth, every double standard. Waiting for the right moment to strike. The music fades to a heartbeat rhythm. And that moment was coming. She'd seen too many families torn apart by visa denials, too many dreamers forced into silence. Then she saw one name, one exception, that shattered the myth of fairness she'd sworn to defend. The frame closes in on her eyes, focused, unwavering. She didn't hesitate. She gathered the files, read the clauses, traced every line of the immigration code until the story began to reveal itself. The voiceover steadies, almost proud. Crockett had faced bullies before. But this wasn't just another debate. This was about the American promise, the one written on paper but too often erased in practice. The music builds to a quiet crescendo. And when she finally turned her attention to Melania Trump's visa, she brought the receipts. The air in the Capitol hearing room feels heavy, too still, too silent for comfort. Cameras whir softly, the fluorescent lights hum overhead, and a dozen lawmakers shift in their seats as Rep. Jasmine Crockett adjusts her microphone. Papers rustle, coughs echo, but everyone knows something is coming. You can sense it. Her tone is even, controlled. But the calm only sharpens the blade. Since we're talking about integrity, she begins, her southern cadence smooth, as silk but sharp as steel. I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. A few heads snap up. Someone clears their throat. One congressman's smirk falters. Crockett doesn't blink. She leans forward. Y'all talk about law and order, about merit, about who deserves to be here. So tell me, where was that energy when it came to the First Lady's EB-1 visa? The words hit the room like a gavel. Across the days, an aide whispers into a congressman's ear. Another fumbles with his phone, scrolling furiously for talking points. The committee chair shifts, pretending to look at his notes, avoiding her eyes. But Crockett's voice fills the silence, deliberate, unflinching. The EB-1, commonly called the Einstein visa, is reserved for immigrants with extraordinary ability, Olympic medalists, Nobel laureates, pioneers of their fields. And yet, she pauses, tilts her head slightly, and lets the weight of the moment hang. And yet somehow, a Slovenian fashion model managed to secure it. A ripple moves through the room, stifled laughs, sharp exhales. But Crockett isn't here for applause. She's here for accountability. She holds up a printed copy of USCIS guidelines, the words, extraordinary ability, underlined in red. This isn't about Melania Trump personally, she continues. This is about the double standard. About a system that throws up walls for some and rolls out red carpets for others. Someone mutters, "That's not fair," under their breath. She hears it. "Oh, it's fair," she fires back without raising her voice. It's fair to ask why a woman who's not a scientist, not a researcher, not an Olympic medalist, was given a visa meant for geniuses. Because if the math is right, then the math should be right for everybody. But I'm telling y'all, the math ain't mathin'. A stunned silence follows. Then murmurs rise like static. Her phrase lands not as a quip, but a verdict, truth wrapped in rhythm. Even her opponents know it. Crockett continues, methodical now, walking the line between logic and indictment. Every week, I meet families who've done everything right, who've waited years, followed every step, and still face deportation. Meanwhile, someone with magazine covers and connections gets the fast track. And we're supposed to call that integrity. Her words hang in the air, heavy and damning. The camera cuts between faces, tight jaws, crossed arms, darting eyes. One Republican congressman whispers to another, "She's grandstanding." But the look on his face says otherwise. He's rattled. Crockett keeps going, her voice calm, deliberate. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to expose a system that rewards privilege while punishing perseverance. Because integrity," she glances around the room, "ain't just a word you use in campaign ads. It's a standard you live by." The chair attempts to interrupt. "Congresswoman, your time has expired." But she doesn't stop. Not yet. She lowers her papers, looks directly into the camera, and says the line that will replay across every news cycle by nightfall. "Y'all talk about integrity. But where was that when it came to the president's own family?" The room freezes. Even the clock on the wall seems to hesitate. The chair glares, gavel trembling slightly before striking. "Order. Order." But there's no order left. Just the echo of her words cutting through marble and microphones alike. In the gallery, someone exhales. On social media, clips are already being clipped, shared caption. Quen mathin trends before the hearing even ends. Crockett gathers her papers calm as ever. She doesn't need applause. The truth has already landed. And yet, behind the composure, there's something else. A quiet storm brewing. Because she knows this isn't just about one visa or one family. It's about what that exception reveals about America itself. The camera lingers on her face as she rises from her seat, chin high, eyes steady. Voiceover, low and resonant. For a moment, the entire country stopped and stared, not just at the question she asked, but at what it uncovered. Because in that instant, integrity wasn't on her trial. It was on America's. A beat of silence. Then the voice deepens, hinting at what's next. But what came next wasn't just a question. It was a national awakening. The chamber is tense. So tense you can hear the buzz of the microphones. Rep. Jasmine Crockett sits forward again, hands clasped, eyes unflinching. The earlier ripples of discomfort have become stillness. Every camera in the room is fixed on her. Every phone is recording. Every breath feels like a countdown. Her voice slices through the silence, calm, deliberate, and devastating. "You're supposed to have significant achievement." She begins each syllable landing with precision. A Nobel Prize. A Pulitzer. An Olympic medal. Some kind of sustained record of extraordinary ability. She pauses, not for effect, but for accuracy. Her tone is professorial, judicial, surgical. "Last time I checked it," she continues, "the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt." The words fall, heavy. The silence that follows is the kind that makes history. The kind where truth stands alone, needing no echo. The camera pans the room, a row of Republicans staring straight ahead, lips tight. A few aides glance down, typing furiously. Behind Crockett, a young intern suppresses a grin. It's not joy, it's recognition. Someone finally said what everyone else tiptoed around. Crockett leans back, lets the stillness breathe. "And yet," she says softly, "she received a visa intended for geniuses." A collective inhale sweeps across the hearing room. Then the voiceover enters, low and cinematic. "For years, The system favored the powerful. Rules bent for the beautiful, the well-connected, the rich. But in a few sentences, Jasmine Crockett turned policy into poetry, and hypocrisy into headline. The screen flashes, news clips, tweets, screenshots. The hashtag #FunMathAntMathin floods across the screen in bold white text. Crockett just asked what everyone's been thinking. One tweet reads. Another, she didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. A viral meme shows Crockett pointing mid-sentence, captiony show your Nobel receipts, sis. The narrator continues. Within minutes, her words traveled farther than any committee transcript ever had. From TikTok edits to late-night monologues, from immigrant forums to dinner tables, the question echoed, how does privilege rewrite the definition of extraordinary? Cut to montage, a scientist in a dim lab, watching the clip on her phone, whispering, finally, a college student in Texas, pausing his homework to rewind the line. A DACA recipient tweeting, that's our voice right there. Back in the hearing room, Crockett hasn't flinched. She's not riding the wave, she is the wave. Her words are precise instruments dismantling decades of quiet injustice. You see, she says, lifting her gaze toward the dais. When working families spend years fighting for a chance, when children get deported over technicalities, when engineers with master's degrees can't stay, it's not just bureaucracy. It's bias. Her tone tightens, not angry, but firm. But when someone who looks the part, who moves in the right circles, gets a visa meant for the best of the best. Suddenly it's subjective. The narrator cuts in. She's quoting the lawyers now. The ones who called it a judgment call. Subjective, they said. As if fairness was a feeling, not a standard. A replay of the actual quote from a 2018 interview plays in. An adjudication officer makes a judgment call. Crockett's rebuttal lands like a verdict. A judgment call? No, that's not judgment. That's privilege wearing a name tag. A stunned murmur ripples through the room. Even her critics can't look away. It's not about Melania anymore. It's about them. The lawmakers, the lobbyists, the ones who built the system and now sit quietly as she dismantles it piece by piece. On social media, someone posts a slow, motion clip of the moment. She says, the math ain't mathin'. The caption reads, every syllable, a subtext. The beat shifts. Strings build under the narration. In that instant, Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a mirror, forcing America to see itself. The immigrant who makes no mistakes yet gets denied. The insider who skips the line and calls it merit. The unspoken rules suddenly spoken aloud. Cut to split screen, Crockett's steady gaze. Melania Trump stepping onto a red carpet, flashbulbs firing. A mother at an immigration office holding her child's hand. The narrator? For some, the system is a wall. For others, it's a runway. The words echo. The same phrase from earlier now returns, looping the story full circle. The music drops out. Just Crockett's voice remains. Integrity, she says softly. Who's about who you know? It's about what you've earned. And if this country wants to stand for fairness, we can't keep pretending that money equals merit. She stops. No paper shuffle, no one coughs. It's pure, unfiltered stillness. Then the gavel slams, but it's too late. The internet has already crowned the moment. #FunMathAntMathin becomes more than a phrase, the narrator intones. It becomes a movement, a shorthand for calling out every quiet contradiction in America's promise. Clips flash of commentators debating the fallout. News anchors replay her quote on loop. Immigrant rights activists print it on posters. T-shirts appear overnight. The math ain't mathin'. Rep. Jasmine Crockett. In one final montage we see Crockett walking out of the Capitol step, wind tugging her jacket. A reporter shouts, Congresswoman, any regrets about your comments? She stops, turns slightly, and replies with the faintest smile, none. The truth doesn't need permission. The narrator returns, voice heavy with admiration. In an age of noise, her words cut through, not with fury but with fact. Not with power, but with principle. Fade to black. The hashtag glows faintly one last time. #FemMathAintMathin. Then silence. Voiceover quiet but firms, but the aftermath would prove the fight was far from over. It begins with a single clip, 15 seconds long, shaky footage from a phone inside the hearing room. Rep. Jasmine Crockett leans into her mic, eyes steady, voice unwavering. The math ain't mathing, y'all. Within an hour, it's everywhere. On X, formerly Twitter, the line explodes across timelines like lightning. Hashtags bloom thick. #FemMathAntMathin. Fun visa for the privileged. Pay. Crockett said it. The sound of her drawl, half humor, half indictment, becomes the rhythm of a nation finally saying what it's always felt, that the equation of justice has never quite balanced. On Instagram, reels pop up like wildfire. Creators stitch Crockett's words over montages of luxury and labor. Melania on red carpets cut against warehouse workers, valedictorians, and immigrant families waiting in embassy lines. The text reads, one visa, two Americas. Night hosts replay the moment with awe and laughter. The math ain't mathin', and neither is the hypocrisy. One quips, cueing applause. Another calls it the political mic drop of the year. But beneath the laughter, the tone has shifted. They're not mocking anymore. They're reckoning. Then come the think pieces. The Atlantic, one Congress spoke the language of the internet. Rolling Stone, Crockett and the arithmetic of power. BuzzFeed, from meme to movement. Why the math ain't mathin' hit so hard? The narrator's voice cuts in. For years, politics spoke in policy, Crockett spoke in poetry. In 5 words, she made the complicated simple, and the powerful accountable. Split screen, news panels debating the fallout. A conservative commentator tries to brush it off. Look, the visa process is complicated, okay? It's not like she committed a crime. A progressive host fires back. No one said she did. The point is that the system treats fame like a credential. Crockett just called that what it is, favoritism dressed as merit. The narrator continues, some dismissed her as performative. Others saw her as prophetic. But for millions watching, especially those who'd waited, applied, prayed for their own papers, her words were a kind of vindication. Montagid, a Kenyan engineer in Houston tweets, 5 rejections. No Nobel, just dreams. The math ain't mathin'. A mother in Los Angeles posts a selfie with her citizenship certificate and the caption, it finally mathed? College students remix her quote into protest chants, no more privilege, no more spin. If the math don't math, we ain't in. The camera pans over city streets, murals appearing overnight. In one, Crockett is painted mid-sentence the words, integrity has a voice, swirling around her. In another, the phrase, the math ain't mathin', wraps around the stars and stripes like a warning and a promise. This was bigger than a visa. It was about visibility, about who gets to belong, who gets believed, and who gets fast-tracked while others get left behind. Back in DC, Crockett's team wakes up to 1,000 new voicemails. Donations surge. Grassroots immigrant organizations quote her in press releases. Her office releases a simple statement, when systems favor the powerful, questioning them isn't radical. It's responsible. Cable news tries to spin it. As Jasmine Crockett attacking women. One pundit asks, no. Another counters she's attacking privilege. As the debate rages, the internet does what it does best. It simplifies, amplifies, and immortalizes. A popular creator posts a remix of her quote over dramatic violence, integrity, minus accountability, equals hypocrisy. The math ain't mathin'. It racks up 10 million views in 2 days. The narrator returns, his tone swelling with conviction. They called it sass. They called it shade. But for millions, it was something holier. The sound of someone finally doing the arithmetic of fairness. Cut to montage, students chanting her words outside a courthouse. Dreamers painting them across banners. Late-night comedians wearing T-shirts with the slogan. Even a math teacher in Chicago writing it across her whiteboard, smiling. Today's lesson? Accountability? Then the world beyond the internet starts to react. Immigration attorneys hold roundtables. Law professors cite Crockett's quote in lectures about bias and systemic inequity. A senator, quietly, cautiously, introduces a bill calling for transparency in EB-1 visa adjudications. The narrator, 5 words had turned into a mirror. A soundbite became a syllabus. And America, for a brief moment, saw its own contradictions reflected back with perfect symmetry. But as the movement grows, so does the resistance. Anonymous accounts flood her mentions. Cable pundits twist her words. Editorials warn she's politicizing immigration. But Crockett doesn't flinch. Her silence online says more than any rebuttal could. A final montage unfolds, slow motion. The Capitol dumb at dusk, tweets fading into clouds, a lone protest sign fluttering in the wind, me belong, the math will math. The voiceover softens, almost reverent now. When the clip went viral, it wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror. The internet did the math, and America didn't like the result. But for once, the numbers were speaking truth. A beat of quiet. The music drops to a single piano note. But beneath the viral fame, something deeper was shifting. A conversation about who really gets to call America home. The noise has faded. The hashtags have cooled. The headlines have moved on. But the echo of Jasmine Crockett's words still hums beneath the surface of America's conscience. Quiet, steady, enduring. The math ain't mathin', y'all. What began as a clapback became a compass. A reminder that in the equation of justice, numbers alone don't tell the story, values do. The narrator's voice returns, softer now, but certain. This was never about envy. Never about tearing someone down. It was about truth, the simple, stubborn kind that survives spin, headlines, and history. Footage plays of Crockett back home in Texas, shaking hands at a community center, laughing with students, listening more than she speaks. The camera lingers on the faces around her, immigrants, veterans, working parents. People who know the weight of earning every inch of belonging. In America, we measure greatness not by privilege but by principle, not by access but by accountability. The truest test of integrity isn't who we let in, but how fairly we open the door. A montage unfolds like a mosaic of the real America. A father in a factory uniform tucks his daughter into bed after a night shift. A nurse walks home at dawn, her badge glinting under streetlights. A student in hijab raises her hand in a crowded lecture hall. A farm worker laughs over lunch with friends, dirt on his hands but pride in his eyes. Each image is a line in the same equation, the quiet arithmetic of perseverance. The narrator continues, "These are the extraordinary abilities that don't make magazine covers. Patience, grit, sacrifice, love of family, love of country. The qualities that keep this nation standing while others chase shortcuts to its summit." Crockett's voice fades back in from an earlier speech, layered over the images. "I'm not mad at anyone who made it here. I'm mad at a system that tells some people they'll never be enough, while handing out golden passes to others who already have everything." The music swells, strings and piano rising like sunlight after a storm. In the end, Crockett's question wasn't about Melania Trump. It was about America, about whether we still believe that fairness belongs to everyone, not just the favored few. The shot widens, aerial view of the Capitol glowing in twilight, then dissolving into classrooms, construction sites, kitchens, and fields across the country. The same pulse beats through them all. Quiet, relentless work. Because integrity isn't inherited. It's earned. It's built every day by the people who choose honesty over comfort, effort over entitlement, truth over privilege. The visuals slow. A time lapse of a dawn sky breaking over small towns and city skylines. Children head to school. Flags ripple in front yards. The narrator pauses, long enough for the silence to feel sacred. When Crockett asked her question, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was holding up a mirror, asking this nation if it still wants to be the land of equal math, where everyone's effort adds up the same. The camera returns to Crockett walking alone down a marble hallway. Her heels echo softly. No entourage, no applause. Just resolve. She stops by a window overlooking the Capitol dome, sunlight catching her expression, calm, proud, unyielding. Voiceover, almost a whisper. Integrity doesn't need permission to speak. It only needs the courage to keep counting, even when the numbers don't add up. A slow fade to the American flag, not waving in triumph, but standing still in quiet honesty. Then the narrator delivers the closing truth, steady and reflective, because in the end, math does more than add up. It reveals what really counts. The screen fades from the American flag to a quiet, steady heartbeat of sound. A pulse that feels like both memory and momentum. The narrator's voice returns, gentle but insistent. "So does the math add up for you?" Clips flash Crockett's face mid-sentence, immigrants at work, protest signs that read "We belong," and a single phrase painted on a wall. The math ain't mathin'. If the system feels rigged, that's because voices like Jasmine Crockett's are too rare and too necessary. She didn't just ask a question. She invited a country to check its own arithmetic. The pace quickens. Edits of social media reactions, classroom discussions, and kitchen table debates. The sound of typing, retweeting, conversation overlapping. The voice rises above the noise. This story isn't over. Because every time you ask why, every time you demand proof, every time you refuse to let privilege masquerade as merit, you're doing the math. A pause. Then softer, more intimate, "So share this. Talk about it. Question the numbers that don't add up, because truth doesn't live in silence, it lives in repetition." The music builds, warm, hopeful, resolute. America isn't defined by who gets through the door first. It's defined by how many we hold it open for. The final montage shows Crockett walking away from the Capitol steps, head high against the wind, the city glowing behind her. The narrator closest. Truth doesn't shout, it multiplies. And the more of us who see it, speak it, and share it, the closer this nation gets to finally balancing its own equation. Fade to black. White text appears on screen. Do the math, demand integrity. Share the truth,